Welcome to Law Excellence Hindu News Analysis. Today we are going to cover these 5 topics that are appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Okay, now coming to the first article. Now this article is saying that amid high inflation, RBI keeps repo rate at 6.5. Now what is the context of the news? Now this article is saying that because of the increasing retail inflation, RBI kept repo rate at a constant level, that is at 6.5%. Now in this article it is saying that this repo rate is unchanged at 6.5% for a record 11th meeting in a row. Now why it is unchanged? This unchanging nature is called as neutral stance. Now from the examination perspective, you have to know the stance taken by the RBI. Now it is being said that there are 3 types of stance, right? One is neutral stance, another one is accommodative stance, another one is calibrated tightening stance. Now you have to know from the examination perspective all these 3 things. And not only that, here it is being said that the repo rate is set at 6.5% by Monetary Policy Committee. Now from the examination perspective, especially from the prelims perspective, previously UPSC asked some questions about Monetary Policy Committee. We have to know what is meant by Monetary Policy Committee, when it is established, why it is established, things like that. And from the examination perspective, in this article it is mentioned that cash reserve ratio is cut by 50 basis points. Now you have to know what is meant by cash reserve ratio, right? What is meant by repo rate, right? All these things are important from the prelims perspective, because every year this concept of money and banking is very important theme in the prelims examination, right? Now this is what the context of the news. Okay, now we will understand the basic concepts regarding it. Now you know about the money supply, right? And there is increasing the money supply in the market. That means people have more money, but there are less goods. That means more money is chasing the less goods. That means this increase the general demand of the goods. So if there is demand of the goods increase and there is more money, that means price rises. This is what inflation here. Now inflation means the general level of increasing prices. Now this is called inflation. Now what happens when there is inflation? There is increasing the prices of goods and services, but not everyone has equal capacity, to afford these things. But another thing is that we often have salaries, but often prices of goods and services increases during inflation, but our salaries are constant, they won't increase, right? In this context, it is really difficult for the people to afford the goods and services. So we need to maintain that inflation at a proper threshold level, right? Now, to prevent such inflation, there is a concept called Monetary Policy Committee. Why? It is being said that Monetary Policy Committee's purpose is to maintain the inflation and balance the growth. Now, for this purpose, Monetary Policy Committee was established. Now, who set the target of this inflation? Now, in India, we have inflation target of maintaining inflation at 4%, right? Plus or minus 2%. Now, who set this target? It is set by the central government. Now, who will achieve this target? It is the Monetary Policy Committee that will achieve this target. Okay. Now, what happened when there is inflation? When there is inflation, now what happened? Consumers' disposable income will reduce. Now you know that in India, majority of the people are middle class and below middle class people. Now hence they have only static amount of income. They are plan their income resources, right? They plan their expenditure. So if there is increase in inflation, their disposable income will reduce. When there is decrease in disposable income, their consumption expenditure reduces. If consumption expenditure reduces, private consumption reduces, and overall it impacts GDP. Now you know that in GDP calculation we have private consumption, okay, government consumption, investment, and export and import, right? Now majority of the component, that is around 45% of the GDP, is coming from the private consumption expenditure. If inflation increases, it impacts the consumer's ability to consume. The disposable income will reduce. Overall, it reduces the GDP. Now, this is what the article is saying. Now, from the examination perspective, we will see what is Monetary Policy Committee, some of the principles fact regarding repo rate and reverse repo rate, cash reserve ratio, and all these things. Okay. Now, to control this money supply, what banks used to do, they will reduce either repo rate or increase the repo rate to control the money supply. Okay. For example, if they are reducing the repo rate, that means interest rates are reducing. That means banks have more money, right? Hence, more money supply in the market, right? This is what called accommodative stance. Now, what is meant by calibrated tightening? Now, calibrated tightening means that RBI increase the repo rate. That means interest rates are increased. Now, it is very costly to take the borrowing for the banks, hence less money in the market. This is what calibrated tightening. Okay, neutral stance means that keeping unchanged. Now, that is what mentioned in this article. Okay. Now, if you see this PYQ of prelims, clearly this theme is very important. It was asked just in 2017 and later years also. In 2021 also this was asked, right? Now this question is saying that which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the Monetary Policy Committee? Now, first statement saying that it decides the RBI's benchmark interest rates. Yes, this is a true statement. It's a 12-member body, including the governor of RBI, and is reconstituted every year. No, this is a wrong statement. First of all, it's a 6-member body, not 12-member, and it is not reconstituted every year because it is constituted for every 5 years, right? Next, it functions under the chairmanship of Union Finance Minister. Now, this is a wrong statement. Now, the chairman of is RBI governor. The answer is only one. How to understand the importance of this topic. Now, we will see certain facts regarding the prelims perspective. Now, just now I have said that the inflation controlling responsibility is given to the Monetary Policy Committee. First of all, Monetary Policy Committee is established under the Act of RBI Act of 1934, right? Now, as per this Act, Monetary Policy Committee has to achieve the inflation target of 4% plus or minus 2%. Now, this inflation target is set by the government of India in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India once in every 5 years. Just now I said once in every 5 years, right? Now, from the Prince perspective, just now you remember that just previously the statement is saying 12-member body, right? It's a wrong statement because it has 6-member body. Now, the decisions taken by the Monetary Policy Committee is binding on the bank, right? Next, RBI governor is the ex-officio chairman of the person. Now, it consists of 6 members, right? Among the 6 members, 3 members are from the banking perspective and 3 members are appointed by the central government. Now, chairman is RBI governor. Now, this decides the RBI's benchmark interest rates. Okay. These are the things you have to remember at least from the examination perspective. Now, coming to the repo rate. Now, as I said, to increase or reduce the money supply in the market, RBI use liquidity adjustment facility. Okay, the name itself is saying the liquidity means money adjusting in the market. Now, through which tools RBI do this? It is through the repo rate, reverse repo rate, SLR, CRR, open market operations, and all these things are the tools used by the RBI to reduce the money supply, and overall, in a way, it controls the inflation and promote the growth in the Indian market, right? Now, repo rate means it is an interest rate at which RBI provides overnight liquidity to the banks against the collateral of government securities, right? So RBI giving overnight loans to the banks, right, by taking the government securities from the banks, right? Now, reverse repo rate means interest rate at which RBI absorbs liquidity on an overnight basis from the banks against the collateral of eligible government securities. See, in reverse repo rate, banks are taking money from the RBI. In reverse repo rate, RBI is taking the money from the banks, right? Okay, both in the both instances there is a need of collateral of government securities as a guarantees. Okay, next in this article it is mentioned that cash reserve ratio is being reduced by 50 basis points, right? Now, what is meant by the cash reserve ratio? Now, cash reserve ratio means the amount of money that requires by the banks to maintain certain percentage of their total deposits as a liquid reserve with the RBI. Now, banks has to maintain certain percentage of the total deposits in the form of cash with RBI. Now, from the police perspective, it is very important that whenever banks maintain cash with the RBI as per the cash reserve ratio, they does not get any interest from the RBI. Remember, this is very important. There is a concept called SLR, statutory liquidity ratio, in which banks have to maintain certain amount of money in the form of defined collateral such as government securities, gold, etc., cash, etc. Okay. Now, that is that it is the amount of money that banks has to kept with themselves, that is SLR. Now, under the CRR, it is the amount of percent total deposits that has to kept with RBI. Okay, to regulate the money supply. Now, from the police perspective, you have to know that, for example, if there is increasing the CRR, money supply market in the reduces. Police perspective, UPS asks such type of relative questions. Okay, and if there is increase in SLR, in the similar way, money supply will reduce. Now, in this article, you have to know that RBI reduce the CRR. That means money supply will increase. Okay, now these are the things that you have to know from the examination perspective. Okay, now coming to the next article. Now, what this article is saying? This article is saying that there are no plans for de-dollarization. This is said by the RBI Governor Shaktikant Das. Now, recently, why he said that like that? Because recently it has been asked by the reporter that because Donald Trump saying that there is a chance of coming with BRICS common currency. If there is thing happen like that, we will impose 100% tariffs on the BRICS nations. Now, this is what said by the Donald Trump. Now, in reaction to that, whenever a question asked to the RBI governor, now he said that de-dollarization is not our objective. It is not at all on our table. We are not interested in de-dollarization. Now, that is what saying. If at all we are taking the rupee-based trade or any bilateral currency trade, it is only because of we want to de-risk the Indian trade in certain circumstances. No, this is what the thing said by the RBI governor. RBI governor said that BRICS common currency is an idea mooted by one of the member in the BRICS nation. Hence, we are not taking concrete decision until now. Now, this is what the saying. Now, this is what the context of the news. RBI governor in this context also said that we have certainly strong forex reserves. Now, if you know that recently it has been mentioned that India had strong forex reserves. For example, ideally it has been said that India should have an import cover of 90 days. But presently, as per the recent economic survey, it has been said that India has enough forex reserve that supports 11 months of import cover. Now, this indicates the strong forex reserves. Hence, this RBI governor is saying that we should not have any objective of de-dollarization because we already have adequate foreign reserves and we are confident to control or tackle any spillover effect of appreciation or depreciation. See, what is meant by first of all de-dollarization? Now, this is the context of the news. Now, de-dollarization is a keyword that you can use in GS paper 3. Any supply chain disruption events happen, or in the economic questions if there is any question that is getting right in especially export and import. This is important topic in the GS paper 3 also or in the prelims also. Right, first of all, we will understand what is meant by de-dollarization. See, de-dollarization means it's a process of reducing reliance on the US dollar in the international trade and services to mitigate the risks associated with the currency volatility. Right? What is meant by currency volatility? That means sudden appreciation or depreciation of the currency. What will happen? For example, if there is sudden appreciation, it will impacts the India's imports because if there is sudden appreciation, it will increase the cost of India's exports. Hence, the competitiveness of India's exports reduces suddenly. For example, if there is sudden depreciation will increase the money supply. Hence, it leads to inflation in the economy. Now, in this way, it is very volatile in nature. To avoid that, there is a process called de-dollarization. No, this is one of the idea. Now, another important issue is that certain times countries impose sanctions on the countries. For example, catch-all sanctions. Now, previously, USA imposed sanctions on the Iran that it does not accept the dollar trade with the Iran or things like that. At that times, countries like Iran, will diversify their forex reserves. Okay, diversify the forex reserves. If at all they want to de-dollarize, they will diversify the forex reserves. They will do the bilateral local currency trade. For example, India, Iran, India, Russia conduct a bilateral currency trade to buy the Russian oil once. Okay, now this is what for example, another example, there is any trade wars happening or tariff wars happening. For example, if you know that there is a devaluation allegation on the China devalues its currency so that its exports can be competitive. Now, because of which America is imposing a lot of tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, sometimes this lead to appreciation of the dollar, right? Now, in that case, promoting INR trade, that means rupification of India trade. Now we have this dream of internationalization of Indian rupee, so that Indian rupee is used in the global trade, so that it maintains that India stand and it integrates India's trade, India's supply chain into the global value chain. No, these are good for India, but in the present moment, it is that the complete de-dollarization is not an objective. India will diversify forex reserves. India will do any bilateral local currency trade only to de-risk the trade. Okay, now this is what the things said by the RBI governor. Okay. Now, this is important, especially in the present context, because of the continuous global supply chain disruptions. Okay. Now, we are often want to see diversify the supply chains. For example, after imposing sanctions on the Iran and reduction of oil prices from the Russia, India diverted its oil base to Russia. Right? India is procuring oil from the Russia. So, in that case, India and Russia have a ruble agreement in which India is paying in Russian currency, Russia is paying in Indian currency, and things like that happening. Okay, this is bilateral currency agreement. Now, this is also one part of de-dollarization, but it is major objective is not de-dollarization, just to de-risk the trade and gain the benefits that Indian economy can get by the local currency. And this is all the things you have to know from the examination perspective, right? You can use these points in the GS paper to IR also, right? Rupification of Indian trade and things like that. Okay. Now, this indicates strongness of the India's economy also, and there is internationalization of rupee because India is presently fifth largest economy, right? And things like that. Now we move to the next article. Now, this article is saying that Trump administration deserves a lot of credit for Quad, shared by the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar. Now, why he said like that? What is the context of the news? The context of the news is recently in Friday, India-Japan forum is conducted. Now, in this context, in discussion on regarding the Quad, it is being said that said by the External Affairs Minister, a lot of credit has to be Mr. Trump because he revived on taking off the Quad grouping. That is what he said. Now, in this article, it is mentioned that there are certain weak links in the Quad grouping because it is a criticism that Quad grouping certain times transforming into a trade bloc from a military alliance. Now, this is what the question asked in 2020 also. Now, that's why this Quad grouping is very much important, especially now you know that geopolitics is shifting to the Indo-Pacific region. Now, this Indo-Pacific region, for this Indo-Pacific stability Okay, and regional integration and free open and navigation, they mooted a concept called quad grouping. Now, hence, this quad is very much important. Okay, geopolitically, geo-economically, and from the examination perspective also. And you can see this important in terms of this previous year question also, right? Now, in this context, it is that in quad grouping, there are certain weak links. For example, India is not definitive on its stance against China, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, especially in the context of quad grouping. Now, this is what the criticism. Now, India iterated that in Quad is a not anti-China alliance, nor it is a military bloc. It is a open bloc, and it is open to the countries who shares its values and interests in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, this is what said by India. Right now, another important thing is that in this article it is mentioned that Australia is often seen as also again a weak link, especially in terms of compared to other countries like such as Japan, India, USA. Australia is a weak link. Now, Australia has a lot of dependence on China also in terms of its investment and imports and things like that. No, this is not saying that it is not a military bloc to counter the China. Rather, it wants to ensure stability in the Indo-Pacific region. This is what reiterating by the India's External Affairs Minister also. Now, in this context, we will know certain basic facts and analysis about the Quad grouping from the examination perspective. First of all, understand the origin of the Quad. So initially, after the 2004 tsunami, because of the regional cooperation and coordination that is required for the humanitarian assistance, this idea of Quad is mooted. Okay, but it was not established, but formally it was established in 2007 by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, right? But after it is being said that there is concerns that are raised by the China because it is considered as criticized as Asian NATO. Now this is what the criticism. Now in this context, this group become redundant, right? It not functioned or not formally meted for longer time, right? Now later in 2017, just now it was mentioned by the External Affairs Minister also. It was again reiterated and formally taken off again by the presidents of America and Japanese prime ministers and things like that. Now, from the examination perspective, because UPS habit of asking international organizations, now remember that the first formal summit of Quad was happened in the 2021, that is virtually, right? Now, later what happened? In 2020, this Malabar exercise, earlier there is Malabar exercise, a tri-service exercise, naval exercise, right? That consists of USA, Japan, and India. Now, later when Australia was joined, it became a grouping of coinciding with Quad. Now, after which it is all again being criticized as a military alliance, right? And things like that. No, this is what happened. Now, from the examination perspective, what is the important prospects or significance of the Quad, right? Now, first and foremost, it is for the regional security. Just now we mentioned that regional security and humanitarian assistance, all these things are important, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, right? Next thing, though it is not officially mentioned, but it is important for countering Chinese rise, especially China is using its capital might, especially in investing in infrastructure projects such as Hambantota Port and its activeness in the South China Sea, especially aggressive policy regarding maritime policies, right? String of pulses and all these things. And next important thing is promoting economic cooperation, right? Now it is being said that Quad countries decided to allocate $50 billion for the infrastructure development in the Indo-Pacific region. Now the member countries are also major economies in the region, right? Now ASEAN region, especially Southeast Association for Regional Cooperation, is a very rising economy. Now in this context, a proper infrastructure for regional economic cooperation and integration is very much required. Right. Another thing is important thing is maritime security. Just now we mentioned maritime security and capability. Now that's why they are conducting joint naval operations such as Malabar and things like that. Okay. And not only that, in the recently G20 summit, there is a proper formal Quad debt management resource was also created. Now this is for cooperation in debt management among the countries and okay things like that. Now this is what the significance of the Quad, right? And not only that, if you know this post-COVID diplomacy also due to the disruptions in the supply chain during the pandemic, Japan and USA want to shift their manufacturing companies out of China in order to curb their imperialistic behavior. Now, this is also well capitalized by India. Also, there are certain investment put by the Japan and India because India is the pharmacy of the world and things like that. Now, there are certain reactions that you have to know. For example, Russia said that as it contains the USA, now it is said that this Quad is led by the USA, hence it is criticized as Asian NATO. No, okay. It is said that it is an aggressive and devious policy for India also. Now, what's said by China? Now, China said that it is an Indo-Pacific NATO, right? it lead to Cold War mentality, it lead to geopolitical rivalry. That is what said by China, right? And these are the things, criticisms especially. And there are certain initiatives also. CAD was very active in terms of, for example, there is a vaccine partnership taken, and climate working group is there. Climate working group is there, and Quad vaccine experts and Quad cyber security group is there. Right now, here it is seen that its objective also involves health security, cyber security, climate change, and humanitarian assistance, maritime security, and counter-terrorism operations. Also, recently, certain countries also shown their interest to join this Quad group that is called as Quad Plus. Now, this includes South Korea, New Zealand, all these countries. Right now, these are the things you have to know from the examination perspective. And there are certain limitations also you have to know from the examination perspective, because quad is a repeated theme in the UPSC means. Now, from the examination perspective, you can write criticism. It does not have any definitive secretariat or formal structure, and there is no concrete decision making that is happening. That is the first thing. And second thing is difficulty in addressing China's concerns. Now, quad grouping is viewed with suspicion by China, which sees it is an attempt to contain its rights. This making it challenging for a group to engage with China in a constructive manner, which may cause tension between the member countries also. Right? Next, in imbalanced cooperation. Now, the members do not have the same level of financial resources, right? There is a strategic awareness and military capabilities in the Indian national region. Now, this creates an imbalance in the cooperation, which might create problems in the future. Just now I said about Australia. Now, limited military capabilities, right? Another important challenge. See, Quad members have varying levels of military capabilities. For example, US being the most powerful and Australia being the least. This could limit the ability to take action if at all needed, right? Another thing is domestic politics. For example, you know that these domestic political considerations could limit the ability to cooperate with one another. For example, let's say India's domestic politics could make it difficult for the country to align itself too closely with USA, because India has to have friendly relations with Russia. Now India has to maintain de-escalation issues with China also. Now in this context, India cannot take that aggressive, stand against China by being in the Quad grouping. Another important thing, geopolitical challenges. See, there are territorial disputes happening, regional tensions, and non-traditional security threats. For example, territorial disputes mean that it disputes in the South China Sea. Even if India have territorial disputes with Sri Lanka regarding Kachitivu Island, and non-traditional security threats also there. So this requires coordinated and sustained effort from the Quad members, which may be again difficult because of this lack of proper boundary demarcation and things like that. Okay, another important criticism is that there is a lack of coherent action taken by the Quad grouping yet, right? This reduces the credibility and effectiveness of addressing the geopolitical challenges. Now, this is what the criticism of CAT grouping. Remember these things from the examination perspective. You can use them in the mains examination directly or indirectly if any question asked regarding the IR perspective. Now, moving to the next article. Now, this article is saying that building on the revival of manufacturing sector. Now, the context of the news is that recently the gross value added of manufacturing sector is growing by 7.3%. And as per the annual survey of industries, the manufacturing output registered a robust growth rate of 21.5%. Now, this is the revival of the manufacturing sector. That is what said by the author. Now, this is very important, especially in the context of the Indian economy. If we see, majority of the employment is being provided by the primary sector and especially agriculture sector. Now, if you know, 45% of the workforce is engaged in the agriculture sector. Now, to increase the incomes of the people and increasing employment and promote the GDP, there is need of revival of manufacturing sector, right? Now, manufacturing sector is stagnated in terms of its contribution to the GDP, that is around 17%. Now, if you know, as per the national manufacturing policy of India, we have a target of achieving 25% of contribution from the manufacturing sector by 2025, right? Now, to achieve this context, we have taken a lot of initiatives such as Make in India, right? Now, later we have taken this production incentive schemes in which we are subsidizing or incentivizing the increasing production of goods from the manufacturers. No, this is encouraging the manufacturers, right? Because they are providing interest advances and initial investments and things like that. Okay. Now, because of this scheme, now this growth rate is achieved or increased is because of the PLI scheme. Now, this is what author is saying. Okay. Now, this article is very important from the examination perspective. If you see the previous year questions of JS paper 3, manufacturing is a repeated topic, right? Now, if we see this previous year question of JS3, it is saying that account for the failure of manufacturing sector in achieving the goal of labor intensive exports. Suggest measures for more labor intensive rather than capital intensive exports. Now, this is what our question asked in the previous year. Now, whatever the things that are said in this article by the author, you can use them in the challenges or measures dimensions in the JS paper 3. Okay. This article said that Because of the PLA scheme, collectively, certain sectors such as textiles, pharmaceutical, and others contributed 58% to the total manufacturing output and registered an output growth of 25% in 2023. Now, this is because of the excellence of this PLA scheme. Now, the other is saying that we have to leverage this momentum and we need to expand the scope of this PLA scheme beyond the traditional industries, and we need to include certain sectors such as apparels, leather, footwear, because these are the employment intensive industries, and furniture, right? And new age sunrise industries such as aerospace and space technology, because this develop R&D ecosystem also. Now, this is what the other author is saying. Now, another important idea that author is mentioned, that to increase the manufacturing sector ecosystem in India, we need to incorporate sectors with a high import dependency but untapped domestic capabilities. What does it mean? Now, it is means that in certain sectors, in certain goods, India is dependent on the imports, but actually, India has the capacity to produce that goods domestically, but that is untapped. By including such sectors in this PLI scheme, India can have reduced the current account deficit. India can reduce its import bill, right? India can ensure that resilience, can truly realize its concept of make in India. And these are the things that author mentioned. But author mentioned certain challenges also. That is concentration of India's industrial activity. What does it mean? There is a regional imbalance in the India's manufacturing activity. This author mentioned that in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, this collectively constitute just these states constitute 50% of the total manufacturing gross value added and 55% of the employment. Now, this indicates a regional imbalance. Now, this manufacturing capacity, because of this regional imbalance, it reduces the potential of realizing the sectors, manufacturing sectors especially. So, to ensure the proper realization of the multiple sectors and manufacturing as a capacity in India, we need to ensure the equitable distribution of the industries. For example, in Tirupur, it is a manufacturing of the textiles. In Chennai, especially in Tamil Nadu, and Chennai and Pune are known for the automobile sectors and things like that. So we need to diversify these manufacturing bases, and this is what author is saying. Other important suggestion given by the author is that we must to focus on the MSMEs and women. Now it is been that the major manufacturing does not have new ability to create the employment, but MSME has the ability to create new employment. Now women are more participating in the ground level or cottage level, micro small level manufacturing activities. Hence, this creates an inclusive ecosystem. That is what the author is saying. So when we include MSMEs and women, this leads to inclusive growth. Now, author mentioned that the importance of MSMEs. Now, you can use this in data in GS paper 3. Now, it is said that MSMEs contribute around 45% of the India's manufacturing GDP, right? And MSMEs employ about 60 million people. Okay. Now, by integrating these MSMEs and the PLA, that is by incentivizing to accommodate MSMEs. Now, how to accommodate MSMEs and the PLA? By lowering the capital investment threshold given to the industries. Now, this is what the condition given under the PLI. We need to lower the capital investment, so to include the MSME. This is what recommending by this author. Author also that we need to reduce the production targets so that it is friendly for MSMEs. Now, in this context, the author mentioned that by including the MSMEs and women in this context, India's manufacturing output could rise by 9% if more women join the workforce. Right? To ensure that women join, we need to create supportive infrastructure such as hostels, dormitories, and childcare facilities near factories. Hence, to make it more from the manufacturing sector in contribution towards GDP, especially India want to become a developed economy by 2047. Without realizing this capacity of manufacturing sector, we cannot become that. That is what author is saying. Now, for that, development has to be inclusive. In that, MSMEs and women has a key role to play. That is what author is saying. You can use these points in your mains examination in JS paper 3. Okay. Now move to the next article. Now, what this article is saying? This article is saying that small finance banks are allowed to transfer loan amounts via UPI. Okay. Now, small finance banks are initially established to reaching the last mile connectivity and financial inclusion as a goal. Okay. Banking services to the marginalized and backward areas and things like that. Now, this is what the thing. Now, from the examination perspective, this is important. If you see previous year questions, small finance banks and differentiated payments banks are asking in the prelims examination. Now, if you see this previous year prelims question, that is said that what is the purpose of setting up of small finance banks? To supply credit to the small business units? Yes, it is true. To supply credit to the small and marginal farmers? Yes, it is true. To encourage young entrepreneurs to set up business, particularly in the rural areas? This is a twisting word. This is not given in its objectives as such. So hence option 1 and 2. So for small finance banks as a theme is important. In fact, banking as a theme is very important from the examination perspective, right? Now you have to know some prelims perspective certain facts regarding small finance banks. So small finance banks is one of the differentiated bank established based on the recommendations of Nachiket More Committee. Now, what is meant by differentiated bank? See, why it is called differentiated bank? Because certain banks are established to give particular type of specific banking products and services in particular areas. Okay, that's why they are called differentiated banks. And small finance banks have certain limitations. They are targeted for financial inclusion in specific areas and things like that. Okay, that's why they are called differentiated banks. Remember, small finance banks are registered under the Companies Act of 2013. They are licensed under the Banking Regulation Act of 1949. Okay, these are very important. The minimum capital requirement of small finance banks is 100 crores. Okay, they can operate without restrictions in terms of the location. Now, you have to remember that there are certain restrictions put on the payment bank. For example, payment banks can only issue debit card, but here small finance banks can issue both debit and credit cards. Okay, there are no restriction on amount of deposits. Why this point is mentioned? Because payment banks are limited. They can have only deposits of 2 lakhs, but here small finance banks have no restrictions. Okay, remember, no restrictions. Okay, the small finance banks must extend 75% of the total credit to the sectors classified as priority sector lending. Okay, you know that this priority sector lending, in which RBI guidelines provide that certain amount of money from the banks as a loan should be given to the priority sectors such as MSMEs, agriculture, marginalized sections and things like that. Remember, this 75% is a fact is very important, because commercial banks, normal commercial banks have only limit of 40% of the credit has to give it to the PLI, priority sector lending. Okay, but small finance banks has to be 75%, right? Now, another important condition is that minimum of 50% of the loan portfolio should consist of loans and advances of up to 25 lakhs. And again, this is the fact you have to remember. Okay, SFCs are subject to all RBI prudential rules and regulations that apply to the existing commercial banks. What does it mean? Like we have SLR here, right? CRR. All these things are applied to the small finance banks also. Okay. Now, these are the things you have to remember from the prelims perspective. And another important thing is NBFCs and microfinance institutions and local banks can choose to convert into small finance banks also. Now, these are the things just you have to remember, so that if at all question asked, because previously small finance banks has asked, UPSC has a habit of asking repeated themes and things like that. Okay, you can use them. Just remember these things, this fact, like 75%, Companies Act 2014, Nachiket More Committee, both debit and credit cards can be issued, things like that. Okay, now moving to the last article of the day. Now, this article is saying that India's growth story will encompass Northeast India. This is what said by the Prime Minister. Now, what is the context of the news? See, Prime Minister recently inaugurated Ashtalakshmi Mahotsav. Now, what is meant by Ashtalakshmi Mahotsav? It's an event celebration of cultural festival in Northeast India. Why it is called Ashtalakshmi? Because Northeast contains 8 states. Now, it has been said that these 8 states are called Ashtalakshmi, and its Mahotsav is celebrating the culture of Northeast India. Now, in which culture, ecology, and economy are very much interlinked in the Northeast area. Now, this is what said by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, in this event, Prime Minister said that in the past century is a West-centric period, but now this 21st century belongs to the East, that is especially Asia and India. In India, it is specifically Eastern India, and in particular, it is the Northeast. Okay. Now, in this event, or in this association also, it is said that this event displays the potential of the Northeast Indian states' cultural tapestry. Okay. Now, what will happen? They will display the local textiles, crafts, arts, and all the things, or GI products and things like that, so that their products will get a global reach. Okay. Now, what can be the outcomes of this meet? There is a buyer seller meet. Now, it has been said that there is an expected outcomes of 2 crore on the spot sales and 50 bulk orders. Right? And investors will meet government representatives and entrepreneurs to discuss the investment opportunities, especially in globalizing the local products. Now, as I said, this event will showcase the region's vibrant textiles industry, artisanal crafts, unique GI products. An investment roundtable will also happen. Now, in this context, their products will be promoted across the Indian level. Now, this promotes investment and promote local industry. Now, this is what the context. Now, where you can use in the examination. I mean, questions like, if at all, if you want to say that in GS paper 3, there are questions about internal security. You can say that this Ashtalakshmi Mahotsav as an example, so that to promote regional stability, promote employment opportunities in the area, promote MSMEs. In GS paper 2, often there is questions about balanced regional development and federalism. In that case, you can say that usage of this Ashtalakshmi Mahotsav and things like that. Okay. In that way, you can use this as an examples in the examination. Okay. Often there are questions that now why Northeastern India is being isolated in terms of development. Now things like that are question asking in the GS paper 1. Now another important thing, what are the initiatives taken for the tribal development? This is also asking me in GS2 and GS1. In that questions you can use these examples. And also in the cultural diversity question of GS paper 1 in Indian society, you can say that this Astalakshmi initiatives like this Astalakshmi are also integrating the culture, economy, ecology, celebrating a holistic development in the northeastern region. Now things like that you can integrate in a smart way. Okay. Now that's all for today. Thank you. Have a nice day.